Hello, Graeme. You're fast with the sharing of the screen, which is perfect. Welcome to the summit, Graeme. And I really hope that we can get some new lessons learned about the prospecting and how we can do it right.
All right, cool. Awesome. Thank you so much for having me today, guys. And what I'm hearing is very, very interesting so far. So today we're going to talk about, from my experience, I've worked with many companies. I really want to focus today about some of the things that I've seen. It's amazing how it doesn't matter if you're talking about a small firm or a large firm. They all have roughly the same problems, but just in different scale. Okay? So maybe, Dansho, while we're waiting, people can put into the chat any of the major issues that they're currently suffering, and we can sort of see what sort of trends there are. What do you think? Is that possible?
Sure. I'm here. Okay. The chat is actually open, so anyone that that has that wants to contribute to the chat, they can write directly.
Right. So before we get started, I really want to go back a step and just sort of talk about the history very quickly of sales development, because I believe that the core or the root problem that we have in building out sales development teams and the model all stems back from how we originally set it up. So I'll cover this really quickly. For some people, it'll be new, and some people it won't be, but we'll give it a quick shot. If you look at most companies when they're a startup, they hire a marketing manager. This is my friend Jake. He's an experienced marketing leader. He's employed to build up the brand, the corporate identity, build your websites. And then over time, what happens? Oh, we've got some inbound leads. Now, when you're an early stage startup, you don't necessarily have a sales team. You're most likely that someone in marketing or someone in the executive will be taking sales meetings. So at some point when you're starting to get more and more inbound leads, it's not cost effective for these people to be critiquing them and to work out whether or not they meet the criteria to move through to an actual meeting. So what do? They hire a junior. Someone that's very simple who can ring up and say, hey, Dansho, I saw that you clicked on one of our white papers. Can I get some feedback? And then they ask a list of questions to see if it should move forward to an account executive or someone in sales. At some point in the future, that company is going to hire my friend Jeff. Jeff is a seasoned sales executive, and he's going to say, you know what, Jake, you're sending me a lot of garbage. There's not a lot here that I can work with, or it's not going to close in time. And no one knows better sales than I do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to decide to go outbound and target accounts that I want to work on and hopefully close. And what is he going to do? He's going to hire my friend Jesse. So then you've got two motions that are going in opposite direction. One's a push and one's a pull. And they each report to different executives who have different skill sets. The problem is that the sales development team sits somewhere in between. Today, historically, you see inbound will sit under Jake in marketing and outbound will sit under Jeff in sales. However, depending on how your organization's structured, that may or may not work, and we'll explain why. Alrighty, so did we get some responses in the chat, Dansho?
No, not yet, Graeme.
Okay. All right, so in the meantime,
what was the question? Maybe you want to just maybe you just want to remind people what was the question?
Yeah, so guys, if you want to quickly just put in there some of the main issues that you have if you're building a sales development machine, right? Do you not have the right people? Do you don't know how to target properly? All right, because I'd love to see it. In the meantime, I'm going to share with you the top 5 mistakes I see across every single organization I've been a part of. Okay? The first one is that they build it as they go. The problem with not having direction is that you end up going down the path that you think is best, but later on when you realize a little bit too late that it's the wrong path, you have to reverse. That can be costly in terms of money, time, resources, and also people don't like change. So if you've been doing something for a while and it no longer works, you have to implement change management. The second one is that the CRM is built badly and it's like a maze to navigate, okay? And so when you have a CRM, whether it's like a HubSpot or a Salesforce that's not correctly configured, guess what? Junk in, junk out. It leads to number 3, really bad reports and dashboards. If you haven't the ability, I've worked with one organization that was very large where they couldn't even build a basic dashboard and report. So if you can't monitor where you've been, how can you work out which is the best direction to go to, right? The fourth part is that the SDR function usually has the wrong or a lack of technology in there, okay? It's a very complex environment. And today we're going to really work on not that the artistic side of sales development, which is messaging. We're talking more around the processes and the science part. And if you've got the wrong tech, then it's sort of like going to a drag race in your car with a push bike. You're just not going to have the power and momentum to really obtain those results that you want, especially in a market that's very competitive. And the last one, of course, is having the wrong people. If you've got the wrong people, then you're really in big trouble. So if I look at the 3 pillars, if I take those 5 elements and I put them into what I call the 3 pillars, you see something like this. The 3 pillars of sales development, and in fact, it's not just sales development, it's any prospecting machine. It comes down to people, process, and technology. Now, I once had a conversation, and I'm sure if you wanted to have a D&M on this, we could actually debate what is the most important. Some people would say, well, listen, you really need good people, but you don't necessarily need a process, good processes or technology. Well, then if everybody's got a different process, then it's very hard to manage and to monitor. But if you've got a good process and you've got good technology, then you can take the average person and make them better, okay? Some people would say, well, if you've got really good technology, then you don't necessarily need good people. So it's all a question of finding those dynamics to make up your perfect outcome. And for every person on this call today, they have to work out what combination of each they need. So here it's, as I said, it's that combination and finding that sweet spot between people, process, and technology to leverage that to get the best ROI on their resources. Okay. So now we're going to deep dive into all 3 of these. Okay. So there's a lot of information here, and I'm going to, due to time, I'm going to have to gloss over a few of them, but feel free to ping me on LinkedIn if you'd like to have a conversation about any of these in more detail. So when you look at people, people are, your most expensive resource, right? They are. Human capital is actually outweighs any other capital expense, even rent of your offices. So it's really important that you start by defining the role clearly and find the right person that matches that role definition. And that definition will depend on the following 4 or 5 points, okay? Is it an inbound role or an outbound role, or what we call an all-bound role? An inbound person is someone who's calling someone who's warm and says, hi, like I said before, hey, Densha, what did you think of this event today? Can we get your feedback? Hey, would you like us to do some consulting work for you? Or an outbound person needs to be very thick-skinned because, an outbound person works in what I call the rejection business. Hey, Densha, you haven't heard of me. It's Graeme from Busy Bee. Hope you're well. Listen, would you be interested in getting some outsourced consulting work, right? Very different personality. And there's those that have to do both. And that's very, very hard to do. You need to also understand whether or not this person is doing the whole funnel of sales development. Are they actually sourcing their own leads and having to enrich them? Do they have to do research on their accounts? Do they then have to build their own cadences and emails and know when to do telephone calls and then ultimately do the outreach? As you get bigger and you start to break down the role, you may decide at some point that you have to centralize sourcing. You might use a third party to do that, or a particular person. Or you might find that there's part of the process like automation that you find, hey, I don't have that skill set and I'm going to get Busy Bee to do it. This will all impact the person that you choose. Then you look at, all right, well, what's the ICP? We talk here about ICP and IPP a lot. ICP is my ideal customer profile versus my ideal persona profile, who I actually am targeting inside that organization. The more enterprise and strategic level organization, the more you need someone who's representing your company that has credibility and can build credibility very quickly with your customers or prospects. And that's why, for me, I've never hired a first employee, someone who's just finished university or graduated from high school, because they don't have the life experience to match and create a good connection with the person on the other side. However, that will change if you have a product that's very mature, such as Salesforce. Everybody in the world who knows Salesforce. So in that case, you can have someone who's just finished university and can read a script, okay? So that's really important. And then it comes down to age versus credibility. Personally, I always look at can my employee make a good, credible output to somebody else? If they can build a credible connection with somebody else, you're half the way there. You also have to remember that no one wants to be an SDR. When kids grow up, when kids are small, and they say, what do you want to be, Johnny, when you're older? No one would ever say, I want to be an SDR, right? And in fact, people are told it's an entry-level position and also an entry point to SaaS, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's an entry-level position, okay? And it's really important to realize that when you look at some of the industry leaders, a lot of them like Lars Nielsen of Snowflake, they have said that opening is the new closing, because the battleground is no longer on trying to close against your competitors, it's trying to get their attention. So in that case, you've got to really have strong people up front and not necessarily hire these junior people. But if most people don't want to be an SDR, then you need to have a good onboarding and training program so that they can get to their career progression, which for most people is not to move into leadership, it's to move into an account executive or something else. Side note, if you look at most contracts, employees have a 3-month probationary period. It doesn't mean that the ramp-up time equals 3 months. My experience is that most SDRs don't fully ramp under 3 months. It's more like between 3 and 6. So you need to make sure that when you talk about career progression, you've factored in getting an ROI on that person. My rule of thumb is about 18 months in my team. It doesn't mean they have to be in the same position. It means that they can can have progression and pay rises, etc. But it's not about staying in the same role. Okay, in America, it's different. The expectation is 12 months, but you need to keep this into consideration. I always think that the best thing to do is actually to hire someone who's more experienced than you actually think that you need. This goes to contrary to what most people believe, because they're too shy that these people want to leave and want to progress faster. And I'm like, that's great, because someone who can come in and bring a little bit more than I need is probably going to help me to accelerate my business, and will probably also bring ideas and help us to get to that next stage faster than someone who may or may not just meet the threshold. Like I said earlier, when you look at the history of sales development, you've got to really consider who owns the sales dev team, because a marketing person has a very different viewpoint on how to interact with a prospect versus a salesperson. More and more today, in the last few years, especially in the US, you'll find that there is now VPs of sales development who sit at the same level of marketing and sales, so that we are colleagues, no longer an employee of one of those teams. And that's my personal preference where possible. Another good thing is that I noticed that in a lot of organizations, when they have trade shows, they don't send SDRs because they believe that SDRs are really good on the phones and that's where they should be. Let me tell you, most AEs do not want to cold call. That's why we have a sales development team. So when you go to a booth and you go to a trade show, who do you really want? You want SDRs hunting wherever they can. My SDR teams, when they go to an event, when they're standing in line to get a coffee, hey, where are you from? What are you doing? Hey, come visit us. We're always hunting and hunting. Give them that opportunity, and it's a great opportunity for them to learn by being next to an account executive on the floor. And in fact, when you look at the conversion rates, they actually learn more by going to an event and working there than they do by a month on the cold calls. Compensate them well, because it is a damn hard job, all right? Again, it's an entry position to SaaS, doesn't mean it's an entry-level job. And last and not the least, but we'll come on to when we start talking about technology and processes in a minute, is that the ultimate aim of getting the best ROI out of an SDR is to focus on how you can amplify and hone the skill set on the human-to-human interaction. Marketing are much better at sending emails and getting open rates. So work with marketing to work on your cadences. Obviously, we can use different wording to the corporate team because they have to work on the corporate style, whereas we can be a little bit cheeky and say things and use gifts and what have you that other people can't. But they've got, marketing are all about open rates and click-through rates. So utilize that skill set. You can use automation platforms to help you do that. So why waste time doing all these things? So the more you can focus on the human-to-human, the more you'll get out of your people and the more you'll get back in your business. And when you're looking at outbound, last point, on outbound, usually it's the AEs that believe that because of their status as the account executives, the closers and coffees for closers, that they actually run the show. I actually believe that the SDRs are actually the quarterback because they're the ones that are seeing who's interacting with all the materials. They're the ones having the upfront conversations with all the leads and getting the referrals from other people. They're the ones that are saying, hey, Jack, I know we just had a meeting, it didn't go well. I've got 4 other people that we should talk to. I think we should talk to A, B, and C. What do you think? They're the ones that are subtly driving the car while the AE thinks that they're driving, but it's actually the SDR that's actually doing the navigation. So the next part that's very integrated and is very significant is the processes. The whole idea is to build something that's standardized, transparent, and measurable, because otherwise what you're doing is, as we say in Australia, herding cats. You can't control a herd of cats. It's impossible. And if you want to build a scalable machine, you have to set the parameters. It doesn't mean that you should forfeit the right of individuals to display and utilize their own personal strengths, whether it be on the phone or creativity. On the contrary, that's the outside. But you need to give them the guardrails as to how to operate. The way I explain it is, the rules on the road are you must wear a seatbelt, have a car that is roadworthy, and you can only do 60 kilometers. Whether or not you want to drive a pink Ferrari in the left lane or a little mini Moke in the right lane is up to you. But we still have road rules that we need to abide by, right? Most companies don't actually start with their process by building a playbook. They wait until they've got 2-3 people. But you should really start documenting from day one your processes, because it's really, really important to share that with other people. You may be sick, somebody needs to take it over, and you don't realize how much information SDRs have to utilize every day. And instead of having to keep asking other people, it's better to have it in one central location. Your playbook is not like the tablets that Moses brought down on Mount Sinai. It has to be updated on a regular basis. When something changes in your platform and your process, you must update it. When we hire someone on board them, it's their responsibility to go through that playbook as part of their onboarding and to update it and edit it. The reality is, the more experienced you get in your role, the less you actually need to refer to it. So it's really a priority for SDRs who are new into your organization to be looking at it. SDRs are the meat in your sandwich, like I said, between sales and marketing. So it's really important that you think about how every process that you build impacts both sides, right? So that means that you should be building SLAs and between both divisions, between marketing and sales. That way you'll be able to really discuss things in an objective way and analyze where there are leakages or bottlenecks in your processes. Some of the things that you should be looking at is defining what the handovers are between the two teams. Things like, what is the qualification criteria for someone to go from a marketing qualified lead to an SDR to take it, or for an SDR to pass it on to an AE, and then should it be actually qualified to move into an opportunity, which therefore would trigger a payment for an SDR. And if you do have a problem and there's a discrepancy, you should actually have a very robust dispute resolution process. Otherwise, you'll find a lot of friction between the teams, and that's really bad for morale. A bit of friction's good, and you can't, I guess, document every scenario, but friction, a little bit of friction creates heat. Too much friction burns your house down. When you're building processes, it's really important to design it, then define everything so that everything is very well explained so that there is no misunderstandings. I believe in the socialization aspect. I normally take people in marketing, some people in my team, and some people in the AE team, usually people that I'm working with closely who understand what I'm trying to build, and they will give me their feedback so that we can find ways to create something that works across all teams. Because as you'll see in a second, there's a lot of duplicity in the way that you can use your CRMs. So why build 3 or 4 different versions to account for someone who's just in marketing versus someone in sales dev or sales, when you could be using the same drop downs? So the more you socialize and get that feedback, then you can implement it. I often talk about eliminate, automate, and outsource. And this is at the top of my head in everything I do. There are a lot of tasks that we do that just yield absolutely no value. So why do we do it? Question it. If it's not yielding any value, then forget it. Eliminate it. Automate as much as you can, because that will create time and space. I'll give you a good example. When you're using multiple platforms, maybe like a HubSpot, and then integrating it, and then having a sales engagement platform like SalesLoft or Outreach, and then a third party on top of that, like a dialing machine, a lot of times people have to click in every single one of those platforms. But if you buy the technology where it's integrated, then they only have to do it once, and it will talk to all the other platforms. That ensures that not only are you saving time, but you're also driving efficiency on your data. There may also be a clause to outsource some of that functions because either you don't have that skill set or it's a better proposition because it's just cheaper. So if you need to use LinkedIn automation, which is a great, and do LinkedIn outreach, if you don't have the time or the resources in your own team, then that's why it's a great option to look at people like BusyBee, right? Or some of the other panels who do email stuff. Talk to them because you can't necessarily do everything when you're trying to grow a team. It's just not efficient. I just want to share.
I can't talk now, okay? I'm working.
Video, hopefully.
All right, bye. All right, you were saying?
He's needy. Every day it's, what did you do? Who did you talk to? Who did you email?
And CRM?
Doc, this is a partnership. I can't provide my 360-degree view if she doesn't share her daily activities. It's about being transparent. Who's that?
Somebody.
Who's Jordan Allen?
He's a prospect. We're talking.
Why I do not know about him?
We're talking.
If CRM don't know about it, it don't exist.
Fine. Then he doesn't exist.
See, Doc? That's what I'm talking about. Disrespectful. Don't appreciate organization.
Doc, I'm great at selling,
She at the top.
but I need some space so I can do it my way.
Your way. Pen and post-it notes.
My system worked.
Spreadsheets?
Yeah, and privacy.
If CRM don't know about it,
Then it don't exist.
that sounds
All right. So this is the number one argument that I have that goes on in every organization, right? Because if it doesn't exist in the CRM,
I can't talk
it just doesn't happen, and it's not
now.
reportable.
I can't talk now, okay?
Right? So at the end of the day, if this is meant to be your source of truth, then you need to protect it. You need to set it up correctly so that you can garner insights and actions. You need to make it easy to use. You need to automate as much as you can and protect the data. It's amazing how many times executives ask for projections or reports, but it's not there because somebody hasn't been updating it. So this is the number one issue, and it underlines everything because every one of your tech platforms must be integrated, and you need to make it mandatory to enter everything into the system. If you don't, you're setting yourself up for failure. All right. Then that comes to, if you've set up correctly, then you can measure what matters. And people normally ask me, what do I measure? So I look at top line, I look at funnel metrics, and then I look at by team. And I'm just going to share this quickly. And if anybody wants, I'm sure we can share these slides later on. It's not a big deal. But this is what I look at on a daily basis. I have set up my reports and dashboards to show me how many meetings have been set versus attended and qualified. Because this is where the money is, right? If people don't, if I've set a meeting and they don't turn up, then I've lost. You can't win a game of sport by default. It's not like a basketball game where, you know, you got 5 players or 4 players and you can still play, but you got 3 you can't play and the other team wins. We win in sales when both teams win, when the customer wins and we win. So if we set a meeting and no one turns up, then, you know, then we're wasting our time. And then we need to see how many of them are actually qualified. Okay. Then I look at how much of the pipeline we're generating, and that's month. I'm looking at quarterly, not just this quarter, but next quarter and the quarter after, and year to date. And that's because a lot of the time, the meetings that we set are not going to be closed in this week, month, or quarter. So we need to start looking at the forecast, because most companies and CROs or VPs of sales will say, listen, next quarter we need to close 2 million. Well, if your conversion rate is 20%, which used to be the industry average, then to close 2 million, you need a pipeline of 10 million. So sales dev, how are we going on creating that 10 million? The closer you can have to that 10 million being at the beginning of the month, the better the chances you are of closing and meeting the target. Once I've gone down the next level, I'm looking at my funnel metrics, like from a lead status, how many are moving to each of the following statuses? How many are being disqualified? How many are engaged with us having conversations? And how many are just put on the back burner for nurture? I'm also looking at the velocity of each of those, how fast they're moving, because then you can start to work out which ones I need to double down on in order to make our targets. And like I said, lastly, I look at my team metrics. Inbound is going to have a very different metric to outbound. It's just a totally different machine. Even within the same team, you may have differences with each individual because each of them have their own skill set, and they're always going to, I guess, pull towards the one that is their furthest, right? To their most strongest area. So what I recommend you do is be able to have conversations around that, but you need to be aware of these. I just want to quickly share this, Duncan. We might be able to come back to this later, but I just want to quickly share. This is a design that I generally use when I'm working with companies about their lead flow. A lot of companies don't have a proper process that leads to an end state, all right? And here you can see that there are 4 definitive end states. If we have a marketing qualified lead and it gets disqualified, we don't want to talk to it again. If it does go to an SDR who's running a process, then the SDR might speak to them and say, you know what, we're not getting anywhere. This needs to be an end state. Or an AE might meet them and say, total waste of time, we should never have been spoken to them, they're an end state. There's only one positive end state, and that's a qualified meeting, right? So ultimately, we need to be looking like this rather than having a big bucket of junk, right? Just on the interest of time, we've only got a couple of slides, so I just want to quickly show you a couple of last things.
Yeah, I'm starting putting pressure.
That's all good. The last part is I just want to show you that this is how big the tech stack is today. This is how big the market is, right? So choosing the right tech stack is really important. Just remember that you scale people faster and more efficiently when you're using the right tech, but don't be stingy on buying tech. You need to give them the right tools of the trade. You should pilot everything and don't underestimate change management because it'll blow up. Ensure everything is trackable, measurable, reportable. And then don't sign up for extended contracts today because technology moves too fast. And look at where your servers are based because sometimes you'll get limited functionality between EMEA and the SDR because of GDPR rules and the like. This is another takeaway that we can share with people, but this is all the tech stack around that people can use to really go to that next level. I just have this last slide with my key 7 takeaways, which I think everyone really wants to know if you haven't been listening. Is hire the architect first, not the builders, all right? That will help you to do number 2, which is design your nirvana. From there, just remember your SDRs are the engine of your growth, so treat them with respect. Integration is key. Protect your source of truth. From there, you can build the right reports and dashboards, and always remember, eliminate, automate, outsource. And that way, you should be on the right track to having a very good process-oriented business.
Have you finished?
Yeah.
Well, I was expecting to. Okay.
Oh,
like
that's it. There you go.
Finishing slide. Graeme, I think you've packed so much information that I will have to replay some of the last slides in a slow motion on the recording that's going to be out after the event.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There was so much to share. Like when I was sharing it with some of my friends, like, but you need to talk about this because it's like we could literally take so many of these topics into 1-hour conversations around one thing.
Exactly.
But
so I can then look at the questions because since you said, well, fill in the chat room, there are like 5-6 questions and plus in the chat several.
Like you were going to a break so people have a bit of time to ask.
Yes, but I would rather people use the break, but still, I know that the insights that you're providing are really valuable, so I wanted at least to have the option to go over the questions.
Yeah, sure.
When you started with what kind of barriers are you facing, the first answer, the question actually is we don't know how to sell our idea. It's in the Q&A. So what kind of really short advice can you share there? Yeah,
so a good idea is to, I actually did this when I was looking for jobs, is to reach out to people like your prospects. If you know who your prospects are, reach out to them and ask them, hey, is this idea something that's important to you, right? So if you're selling a VPN software and you're not sure if it's really relevant, go out to the people that you think it could be. Firstly, obviously start with your friends and family who work in that industry, socialize that way, but go out to a few people and say, listen, can I pick your brain? How do you choose a VPN? What are the criteria? And then start to work out, are you meeting it? And what are the messaging and the words that you use? That's the first thing that I normally do when I'm looking at messaging, but I try to interview people around what is their problem and can they articulate it, and then start asking questions around my solution, because you don't sell a product, you sell a solution to a problem. value selling, right?
Yeah, yeah. Perfect. How to keep the SDRs for a long term, as it is perceived as a junior start of a sales career rather than a long-term position. So how you can keep them for a long term?
That's a good question. Just so you know, my average tenure of SDRs in my team is 3 years, and that's really, really long, partly because there wasn't a quick move into the other divisions. Firstly, I think you need to be upfront with your recruitment process and ask people, look, my expectation is that you would be in this role for about 18 months. If you're smashing targets, maybe after 12 months, but it's around that 18-month to 2-year mark. But what you have to do is give them goals to work towards. If you're hitting target for the next 3 months and you're growing, then you give them a pay rise, give them bigger customers to work on. I always have projects, because if you saw that, like going through all the things that we would discuss, say there's so many projects going on, then I would say to them, what is your interest? What are you interested in doing? So Dancho, if you said, look, I love technology, great. Can you help me to evaluate some of my tech and be part of the testing? And what they do is they feel so invested that they will want to stay with you, right? And then what happens is you're giving them leadership roles without actually giving them necessarily a title. And when they feel valued, then they're more likely to stay with you from engagement. But just also don't be tight on the money.
True. Graeme, we have to start the break. I would like to go at least a few more questions, but for the people that it's official break part, I don't want to keep them. But Tural is actually asking you about the outbound SDR. They're mainly working on the cold call, the prospecting, while the inbound SDR are assisting the inbound leads and taking them to the next step. So the question is, how can I create a strong team of outbounders and inbounds separated from each other and both reaching high targets?
Great, good question. Again, it comes down to, firstly, let me qualify that. Every SDR that's inbound and outbound are all doing the triple threat. They're all using emails, LinkedIn, and the phone. It's not about the different channels, because we have to reach them one way or another. The more it's the difference between the two of them is how warm are they. An inbound lead is someone who is engaged with content of some sort on our website. It could be, I have a question, I'm looking for pricing, or I've watched this summit, for instance, that is going to turn into an outbound and a cold call from the marketing team. Hey, what do you think? Can we sell you some business? I mean, that's what we do. The outbound is more rejection oriented. So you have to set up for the inbound. It's about setting up the right sequences and setting up the right processes in Salesforce or your CRM, and teaching them how to have the tonality. It's very different. And your outbound team need to be a little bit, as I say, a little bit cheeky. They need to be work out how to get around the gatekeepers, but they leverage off each other. So there's two separate teams, but they are working together at the same time because
with the same goal.
They're all hearing things. But you need to have leadership that specializes in one or the other when you start to build them out into separate teams, because they are a different type of machine, right? But having said that, just one caveat on that, Danjo, is that when we're talking about outbound, I also refer to, if they're working on an outbound target account, anything that's inbound on that account belongs to that outbound SDR. Otherwise, the inbound person is cutting their grass, as we say. Yeah, he's doing crossfire. So they're still doing a little bit of inbound, but it's more on their designated accounts. So I hope that makes some sense.
Yeah, no, it's perfect, Graeme. I have 1-2 more questions.
Sure.
These were more personal. I find it challenging to keep a relationship with people. Let me just put it answer live so you can have access to it. We find it challenging to keep a relationship with people who might not be interested at the moment, but they are the right target and might be interested in the future.
Okay. So this is from an outbound, like a SDR perspective, I take it?
Yeah. They are reaching out to their target audience. They're not interested at the moment, but since it's a good target audience, they might be interested in the future.
Yeah. I think that this is what I was talking about earlier, which is you need to find people that are good at the human-to-human interaction, because this is where you get that little nugget of information. Dancho, how was your weekend? Good to speak to you again. I know you weren't expecting me to call you after 3 months. How was your weekend? Oh, your kids play soccer on the weekend? Oh, how did they go? So in 3 months' time, I'm going to talk about soccer firstly, right? I guess there's two parts. One is the personal, one's the business. From a business perspective, you need to ask the key questions. If now's not the right time to talk, when would be the right time? When is there a critical event that would cause you to want to speak to me? Like, for instance, I'm not in contract. I'm out of contract in March next year. Okay, so when will you start to discuss alternatives? December. Great. So I'm going to call you in November, just in case you're lying to me, right? Or it could be we don't have budget until January. Okay, but when are you starting to look at budget? We try and finalize that in December. Great. So I'm going to call you in October. So you have to understand the right questions to ask, and don't feel bad about asking. If they're interested and they're the right person, you should never apologize for asking legitimate questions. The second part is doing the business, is being personal, right? If you're calling, especially in enterprise prospects, over and over, you get to know them, all right? And you should, because we do business with people. We buy products from companies, but we do business with people, right?
Yep. And Graeme, I have one more, but you have to be a bit faster, but at least have 10 minutes break. For a small service-based company, do you recommend that marketing is a separate department reporting to the CEO, or within the marketing/sales department that are reporting to the sales marketing department? So
the sales
do you think that marketing should be a separate department, or actually it should be marketing/sales for a small service-based company?
Cool. I generally believe that they're all separate. They're separate and should report directly to the CEO, but they're all colleagues and they need to work together because they're different functions. The sales guys rely on marketing, but the sales guy doesn't actually know what should go into the marketing. They might give some ideas, but the marketing guy knows better. So why have a boss above him who's going to block it, right? So I believe that they should all be reporting to the CEO, who is the only person that should veto the decision of the expert. Hope that was succinct enough.
Well, Graeme, thank you very much for the responses. I really find them useful. Let's start a short break. Thank you very much again for contributing to the conversation.
Thank you, guys.